The Zorthal Empire's flagship, Oblivion Spear, drifted above the burning husk of what had once been a human colony. Below, forests smoldered, oceans boiled, and cities flickered out one by one as plasma lances carved through them with mechanical precision. Admiral Carvex watched the destruction from the bridge's panoramic viewport with the casual disinterest of someone skimming a dull report. A cluster of bright explosions far beneath painted his scaled face in orange light. He didn't even blink. Another nest of vermin cleared, one of his officers said, voice thick with amusement. How many is this now? A dozen? 14, Carvex replied flatly, adjusting the polished crest along his temple. They breed quickly, but scatter faster. Not worth counting. The humans had offered no resistance worth mentioning. They never did. Thin atmosphere craft and antique orbital guns were hardly a defense fleet. The Zorthal Empire had fought real wars centuries ago. These raids felt more like pest control. He doubted the rest of the fleet even bothered keeping tallies anymore. One of his subcommanders approached, armored plates gleaming under the cold lights. Admiral, our scouts report another human settlement deeper in this spiral arm. Sparse defenses, no military installations detected. Carvex exhaled slowly through his secondary lungs, a gesture of boredom among his kind. Then burn it. As always. A murmur of assent rippled through the bridge crew. Another easy conquest. Another lifeless rock for the archives. The Zorthal war machine rolled onward like a tide, and nothing had ever slowed it, let alone stopped it. That was the problem, Carvex thought. After decades of unbroken victories, the thrill was gone. There was no glory in crushing primitives who still used chemical engines and kinetic projectiles. He sometimes wondered if the old wars his ancestors spoke of, the ones with fleets the size of continents clashing across nebulae, had been exaggerated. Nothing in this age came close. Still, orders were orders. The empire expanded. The lesser species fell. It was the way of things. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the Oblivion Spear entered faster-than-light transit toward its next target. A few officers speculated idly about what humans called their homeworld. Earth, wasn't it? The name came up often in intercepted transmissions. Some believed the species revered it almost religiously. Perhaps we should visit this Earth, one officer said, mandibles clicking in amusement. Show them their gods bleed like everything else. A ripple of laughter passed through the crew. Carvex permitted himself a thin smile. Yes. Perhaps the homeworld would fall like the rest, and then this tedious campaign would end. The Oblivion Spear dropped into orbit hours later above a blue and white planet circling a yellow sun. Earth. It looked almost fragile against the dark. Carvex leaned forward in his command chair. No orbital defense grid worth mentioning. A few aging stations. Civilian traffic scurrying like insects across the stratosphere. Entirely unworthy of imperial notice. Shall I order the fleet to sterilize the orbital layer, Admiral? His weapons officer asked. Carvex gave a slow nod. Remove their eyes first. Then their breath. Plasma batteries armed with predatory hums. Target locks painted fragile satellites and weather stations. Across the bridge, officers murmured predictions on how quickly Earth would fall. An hour, perhaps two. Then the transmission came. A single human voice, male, calm enough to draw frowns from the Zorthal crew. It crackled through the comm in multiple languages, translated instantly by the ship's systems. This is Earth Command, the voice said evenly. You have made a grave mistake. Leave orbit immediately. This is your only warning. Silence followed. Carvex blinked once, then glanced at his officers. Some chittered in disbelief. Others laughed outright. That was a threat, someone scoffed. From them, the weapons officer smirked, mandibles spreading in mockery. Admiral, permission to answer their warning? Granted, Carvex said dryly. The officer toggled the comm. Humans, he said, voice dripping contempt. We are the Zorthal Empire. Your colonies burn. Your fleets scatter. Your species kneels before history's tide. We accept your surrender. Refuse, and your world dies screaming. He cut the channel amid laughter. On Earth's surface, No response came. Carvex felt the faintest stir of annoyance. Defiance was one thing, silence another. He signaled weapons readiness. Destroy their orbital stations. Prepare for atmospheric bombardment. The fleet moved into position with the grace of seasoned predators. Plasma lances charged, tracking stations and defense grids such as they were across continents below. Then something changed. On the planet's surface, vast regions went dark, not with destruction, but by intent. Cities dimmed. Civilian craft grounded. Even the orbital satellites ceased transmitting, as if someone had cut every wire at once. Carvex frowned. "What are they doing?" a subcommander muttered. No one answered. A tremor rolled through Earth's crust. Across mountain ranges and desert basins, entire landscapes shifted. What the fleet first took for earthquakes resolved into something else entirely. Vast plates of metal unfolding from beneath the surface, kilometers across, revealing enormous armored structures that had slept beneath human soil for decades. Launch doors bigger than cities yawned open. From one, a shape emerged, monolithic, angular, bristling with weapons whose designs matched nothing in Imperial records. A vessel rose silently into the upper atmosphere, dwarfing even the Oblivion Sphere. Its hull bore no visible engines, no energy signatures the scanners could interpret. It simply climbed higher, shedding the dust of centuries, black against the sky. Carvex rose slowly from his command chair. "Admiral," his sensor chief whispered, voice tight, that ship is the size of a moon." The bridge fell silent. The massive vessel cleared the upper atmosphere. Its hull caught the sunlight for the first time in its existence, and lines of unfamiliar weaponry glimmered like unsheathed blades. Then more doors opened. Another ship, then another. Entire mountain ranges split apart to release them, each vessel larger than anything the Zorthal Empire had ever fielded. The humans had been building them here, beneath their very feet, while the galaxy mocked their weakness. Carvex felt the first stirrings of unease ripple through his scales. Earth sent one final transmission, cold and unhurried. "You should have stayed away." The Oblivion Sphere held position above the rising armada, its crew frozen, as the balance of power across the galaxy shifted beneath their feet. And Admiral Carvex, veteran of 100 campaigns, realized for the first time in decades that he might not survive the next hour. The first human warship rose into orbit without haste, its hull swallowing sunlight until the blue skies of Earth lay in shadow beneath it. Admiral Carvex stood rigid on the Oblivion Sphere's bridge, every instinct in his war-hardened body warning him to retreat, yet his pride chained his voice. He watched scanners stutter and fail as they tried to read the vessel's systems. Energy signatures came back blank. Hull composition unknown. Weapon arrays unidentifiable. It was not a warship in the sense the Zorthal Empire understood. Their fleets were monuments to intimidation, gilded, bristling, designed to cow weaker species before the first shot fired. This human construct carried no such arrogance. It was silent, angular, designed with a brutal utility that suggested it existed only to kill as quickly and efficiently as possible. His weapons officer broke the tense stillness. "Admiral, the ship is locking something onto us." Carvex turned sharply. "Weapon systems." No energy spikes detected. No missiles. No plasma coils charging. But something is tracking us. The Admiral's throat plates flexed uneasily. He gave the only order his pride would allow. "Fire on it. Full power." The Oblivion Sphere and 3 escort cruisers unleashed a storm of plasma lances. Blinding threads of energy crossed space, burning through the void toward the rising human vessel. Not one struck home. The ship moved, not fast, not evasively. It simply wasn't where the targeting systems thought it was. As if it anticipated the attack before it happened, sliding through trajectories with a precision bordering on mockery. Then the human ship answered. No visible weapon discharged. No beam cut the void. Instead, the Oblivion Sphere shuddered violently as something slammed into its shields with the force of a meteor. Hull plating screamed under impact. A heartbeat later, a second strike ripped through one of the escort cruisers, cleaving it nearly in half. The ship bloomed into debris and silence before its crew even had time to scream. "Admiral," the sensor chief cried. Kinetic projectiles, solid metal, dropped from near orbit at a fraction of light speed. "They don't use energy weapons at all." Carvex stared as another spear of invisible death tore through a second cruiser, this time punching clean through its reactor core. The vessel's detonation flared across the bridge's panoramic windows, washing everything in harsh, white light. The human ship never spoke, never signaled. It simply eliminated threats with clinical precision, each strike fired only once, never wasted, never repeated. On the fleet channel, captains demanded orders. Retreat? Counterattack? They never faced an enemy that ignored every rule of warfare the Empire understood. Carvex found his voice at last. "All ships, defensive pattern. Do not close range. I want full scans, learn something about this enemy, before it kills us all." The order steadied him, but only slightly. Across the bridge, the officer's earlier arrogance had evaporated. No one mocked now. They whispered, eyes flicking to the Admiral, as if waiting for him to admit what none dared say aloud. The Zorthal Empire had finally met something it did not understand. As the fleet scrambled to regroup, Carvex retreated to his command chamber. The door sealed behind him, muting the panicked voices of his crew. He keyed the console and summoned the human data archives seized from earlier colonies. The images flickered to life around him, grainy recordings of human wars across centuries. Trenches swallowing millions. Cities incinerated by bombs that burned hotter than suns. Metal beasts crawling over ruined landscapes, while soldiers in crude armor slaughtered each other for scraps of earth. Carvex watched in silence. This was not the Empire's way. Conquest for them was clean, swift, almost ritualistic. One decisive strike, occupation, compliance enforced by terror. They destroyed only what resisted. Humans, by contrast, had turned violence into something far worse than conquest. Their wars looked endless, fought over beliefs, borders, insults, madness by any rational standard. He saw battles where victory left nothing living behind, only landscapes poisoned for generations. They did this to themselves, he thought, unable to look away. And now they had stopped, united judging by the scale of the warships lifting from Earth. That same ruthless ingenuity once spent on each other was now aimed outward. Carvex felt something foreign coil beneath his armor. Fear. His second-in-command interrupted the feed with a calm request. "Admiral, the Council demands an update. They want assurance the situation is under control." Of course they did. Safe on their core worlds, they couldn't smell the burning hull metal in the corridors or hear the nervous edge in every officer's voice. "Put them through," Carvex said. The High Council appeared as towering holograms, robed in imperial crimson. One spoke sharply. "Admiral, reports suggest difficulties." "Clarify." Carvex described the engagement carefully, omitting nothing but his own rising dread. He expected orders for reinforcements, escalation, perhaps even a temporary withdrawal. Instead, the council chamber erupted in laughter. "One human ship defeats 3 cruisers and you come to us trembling?" scoffed Councillor Vare. "Primitive luck. Nothing more." With respect, Carvex said tightly, this was no accident. They hid weapons of staggering scale beneath their own soil. This entire war may have been a lure. Another counselor waved the idea aside. "Humans are clever scavengers, nothing more. Crush their toys and be done with it." They didn't understand. None of them had stood on this bridge, felt the cold precision with which those ships killed. "Send the full fleet," Vare ordered. "We will make an example of Earth before the other frontier species grow bold." The transmission ended before Carvex could argue. He stood alone for a long moment, claws flexing against the metal floor. The council hadn't seen the recordings. They had watched soldiers in mud-stained uniforms fight through firestorms with eyes full of determination instead of fear. Carvex had. And the thought came, unbidden and unwelcome. We should have killed them centuries ago, before they learned to do this together. Back on the bridge, more human warships breached the atmosphere, vast silhouettes blotting the stars one by one. The fleet officers fell silent, watching their sensors fail again and again to read the ship's capabilities. The humans still hadn't fired on Earth's surface. They weren't defending. They were waiting for what no one knew. And Carvex, veteran of countless victories, felt the sinking certainty that the Zorthal Empire had already lost, and the rest of the galaxy simply didn't realize it yet. The first counterstrike came without warning, without even the dignity of a formal declaration. One moment the Zorthal Empire's border defenses spun lazily around distant moons, half their crews asleep at their stations. The next, wormholes tore open across 3 star systems at once, silent and precise, vomiting forth human ships in numbers that made sensors fail outright. Admiral Carvex stood on the bridge of the Oblivion Sphere, forced to watch from light years away as reports poured in. Shipyards shattered before alarms even sounded, entire carrier groups cut apart by weapons the Empire had no names for. He kept his posture rigid, but his throat plates twitched with every new burst of static that meant another fleet gone. The humans did not fight like the Empire. No speeches. No threats. They moved with the cold focus of surgeons dismantling a patient, one organ at a time. Dreadnoughts slipped from wormholes, released clouds of autonomous drones, then vanished before counterattacks even began. Those drones ignored civilian traffic, striking only shipyards, fuel depots, command centers, each shot clean, calculated, efficient. Carvex had expected vengeance. Instead, he saw extermination of infrastructure, the quiet erasure of everything that made the Empire's fleets possible. He realized, with growing unease, that the humans had studied them, knew which relays carried orders, which moons hid supply caches, which factories built replacement hulls. Every weakness mapped. Every strike timed so precisely that Imperial forces never even managed to organize a retreat. On the bridge, officers barked updates across overlapping channels. A dozen systems gone dark already. Communications collapsing. Refugee ships begging for escort. Carvex ignored them all, eyes fixed on the tactical display blooming with red across half the Empire's outer territories. This wasn't war. This was dissection. One of his captains appeared on the fleet channel, voice tight. Admiral, permission to consolidate forces around the capital worlds before they reach the core. They won't go for the capital, Carvex said quietly, too quietly for anyone to miss. They don't want our throne. They want our fleet dead. The channel fell silent. It was then the humans finally spoke. Not through intercepted signals or demands for surrender. No, their first message came in the form of a broadcast across every system under attack, plain language, translated for the Empire's people to hear. Evacuate your military installations, the voice said, calm as ice. Civilians will not be harmed. Resistance will be erased. Leave and live. Not a threat. Not even hatred. Just instructions, delivered like someone warning strangers away from a spreading fire. Carvex watched the recording twice before speaking. Play it again. The voice repeated, smooth, precise, stripped of all emotion. Leave and live. Some council members called it mercy. Others, cowardice. Carvex heard something worse in it. Certainty. The kind that comes from strength so absolute it no longer needs to shout. He turned to his officers. What are the drones? Every engagement ends the same. One reported, mandibles tight. They strike, dismantle defenses, then vanish into deep space before counterattacks arrive. It's mathematical. Carvex almost laughed. Not from humor, but from the bitter knowledge sinking through his armor like ice water. The Empire had always prized terror as its weapon. Make enemies fear you, and victory comes before the battle begins. But fear was a weapon that cut both ways. He could feel it spreading now through the council, the fleets, even the common citizens watching human drones slice through the Empire's proud armadas like predators in a slaughterhouse. He felt it himself. Because Carvex understood something his council did not. Humans had not unleashed their full strength yet. The recordings from Earth proved it. Those colossal warships built into the bones of the planet itself. None had left orbit since that first engagement. Humanity fought this entire campaign with drones, smaller fleets, precision strikes, as if testing the Empire's reactions before deciding how much force to bring to bear. And still the Empire collapsed. The Council summoned Carvex again, voices cracking now beneath their ceremonial arrogance. They demanded explanations, demanded victories he could not give. Some shouted for negotiations, others for full mobilization. Mobilize what? Carvex snapped before he could stop himself. They have gutted our shipyards, silenced our communications, blinded our sensors. We swing at shadows while they carve the Empire apart piece by piece. One counselor hissed through the channel. You exaggerate their threat. Primitive scavengers with stolen technology. Then you explain, Carvex interrupted, voice like stone, how primitives learned to open simultaneous wormholes across a dozen systems, strike with weapons that ignore our shields, dismantle fleets without harming civilians, and vanish before we can so much as track their exhaust trails. No one answered, because they had all seen the same reports he had. Entire fleets cut down to the last ship while orbital cities beneath them remained untouched. The humans weren't here to conquer territory. They were sending a message. Carvex thought of the old war recordings again, humans fighting each other with fanatical resolve, never stopping until one side ceased to exist. The Council hadn't watched those archives. He had. And he knew what it meant now that such a species fought with a single purpose instead of 1,000 warring flags. The Empire wouldn't survive it. Another alert bloomed across the tactical display. Human fleets, larger ones this time, dropping out of wormholes in the systems nearest the capital itself. Not drones now. Full-scale warships, each one rivaling the Oblivion Sphere in mass, flanked by swarms of automated escorts. The officers on the bridge turned to him, waiting for orders. Retreat? Defense lines? Carvex gave none. Because for the first time in his life, Admiral Carvex did not believe the Empire could win. And as the human fleet advanced in perfect silence, he realized with a hollow twist in his chest that victory had never been their goal. This was punishment. The kind you delivered not out of rage, but out of cold, merciless calculation. The capital system burned in silence. Entire defense rings shattered before the Imperial fleet could even form into battle lines, their fragments scattering across the void like the bones of extinct beasts. The human armada advanced with chilling precision, each strike coordinated so perfectly that no shot repeated, no attack missed. Admiral Carvex stood rigid on the Oblivion Sphere's bridge as reports came in from every front. The humans had breached the inner systems. Automated drones crippled shipyards. Entire communications networks fell offline within minutes of contact. Planetary shields collapsed before they even finished charging. And through it all, the human fleet offered the same message: evacuate military installations, leave civilians untouched, surrender and live. The Council had refused. They had invoked the old pride of the Empire, demanded resistance to the last warship, the last soldier. Now their homeworld skies were falling silent, one defense grid at a time. Carvex watched the tactical display bloom red across the capital orbitals. His claws dug into the command chair's armrests until metal groaned beneath them. He had fought for the Empire his entire life, had believed in its dominance as unshakable law. Yet here, in the space above the throne world itself, the humans dismantled that law with cold efficiency. A voice cut across the bridge. One of his officers, strained. Admiral, they're not targeting the council chambers. Only the fleet. Carvex already knew. He had seen the pattern since Earth. They didn't want palaces or politicians. They wanted the Empire defanged, unable to ever threaten them again. And they were succeeding. The Oblivion Sphere trembled as another kinetic strike tore through the Imperial battle line. Enemy vessels, sleek, angular, unyielding, moved like predators through swarms of helpless prey. Each time the Empire tried to rally, another wormhole opened behind them, cutting supply lines, severing retreat corridors, annihilating reinforcements before they arrived. For the first time in living memory, the Zorthal fleet broke. Warships fled toward the core in chaotic waves. Discipline collapsed. Pride crumbled. What remained of the council screamed for Carvex to hold the line, but their orders carried the hollow weight of ghosts. He opened a channel to them, anyway. Their towering holograms filled the bridge, faces drawn tight with fury and fear. "You will counterattack," one demanded. "Every ship to the capital's defense." "There is no defense," Carvex interrupted, voice low but carrying across the chamber. "You saw the same feeds I did. Entire fleets erased before they fired a shot. Our yards in ruins. Our shipwrights dead. Even if we win today, the Empire will never rebuild fast enough to matter." "You exaggerate." "Do I?" Carvex snapped, letting decades of restrained obedience fracture in a single moment. "Look outside. That is not war. That is extermination of our capacity to make war. They don't want our throne. They want our empire incapable of ever lifting a weapon against them again." The counselors fell silent, their arrogance finally cracking as orbital fire bloomed behind them. Another alert chimed across the bridge. A colossal human warship, the same class that had risen from Earth's soil, emerged from a wormhole above the capital. Its black hull blotted out the stars, dwarfing even the Oblivion sphere. It did not fire. It simply held position, flanked by hundreds of smaller vessels that formed a wall between the human fleet and the broken remains of the Zorthal armada. Then a transmission came through, unhurried, almost calm. "Admiral Carvex," the human voice said, "your fleet is defeated. Your military infrastructure lies in ruin. Further resistance will achieve nothing but death. Surrender, and your civilians will be spared. Refuse, and the Empire ends today." The bridge crew turned to him, waiting. Even the council holograms froze, their earlier demands swallowed by the quiet weight of that voice. Carvex stared at the human warship filling his viewport. He thought of the old campaigns, the species crushed beneath imperial rule, the colonies burned because they had been too slow to kneel. He remembered his own certainty, his belief that conquest brought order, that the Empire's strength meant stability. And now he wondered if the humans had watched those same campaigns from afar, learning, waiting, planning. He opened the channel. "If we surrender," he said carefully, "what becomes of the Empire?" There was a pause. "Then, your people will govern themselves. Your fleets will disarm. Your council will answer to a new galactic order, one that values survival over dominion. Not conquest," Carvex realized. Not revenge. Control. The humans were not tearing down the Empire to replace it with fire. They were pruning it like a diseased branch before it poisoned the forest. He looked at the council's panicked faces, then at his own officers, silent and waiting. They were soldiers, not fanatics. They wanted an end to this before nothing remained. Slowly, Carvex spoke the words no Zorthal had uttered in centuries. "We surrender." The transmission cut. Human fleets ceased fire instantly. Across the system, drones powered down, warships halted mid-advance, orbital guns fell silent. For the first time in days, the stars stopped burning. Carvex felt the weight settle on his shoulders, not of defeat, but of realization. The Empire was over. Not just beaten, but finished as a power. Generations of conquest, of dominance, ended in less than a single campaign. A new transmission arrived, this one directed solely to him. "You will remain as provisional governor," the human voice said. "Your knowledge will help stabilize the transition. The alternative is collapse into chaos. We prefer order." Carvex almost laughed. They had dismantled his empire, broken his fleets, killed his legacy, and now offered him administration of its ruins. But he understood. Better to have a defeated enemy managing surrender than a vacuum breeding rebellion. Humans thought like conquerors who wanted no empire of their own, only control enough to prevent the next war. On the bridge, his officers exhaled in visible relief. The council holograms flickered, furious but impotent. None dared speak against the surrender. Carvex turned back to the viewport. The human fleet hung motionless above the capital like silent judges. Their warships did not gloat, did not strafe fleeing vessels, did not broadcast victory hymns. They simply waited. And Carvex, soldier of a fallen empire, realized the galaxy had changed hands in utter silence. Humanity had awakened, and nothing would ever put it back to sleep.